In the middle of a vast, silent desert, there is a hole in the earth that has been burning for over 50 years. It's not a volcano, and it's not a natural coal fire. It is a massive, glowing pit of orange flame that never goes out, fueled by an invisible force that by all accounts should have run out decades ago. But the craziest part isn't the fire itself. It's the fact that humans are the ones who lit the match. We created this, and now we have absolutely no idea how to stop it. But the fire isn't even the most unsettling part of this place. Wait until you hear what's crawling into the flames every single night. To understand why this place feels so otherworldly, you first have to understand where we are. We're in the heart of the Karakum Desert in Turkmenistan. This is one of the most remote and arid places on the planet, covering about 70% of the country. To get here, you have to leave the capital city of Ashgabat, a city famously built almost entirely out of white marble, and drive for hours into a landscape that looks more like the surface of Mars than anything on Earth. There are no paved roads for the final stretch, just tracks in the sand that shift with the wind. As you approach, you don't see the crater at first. You just see a strange, flickering glow on the horizon, like a sunset that refuses to end. But as you pull closer, the scale of it hits you. This is the Darvaza gas crater, though locals and travelers almost exclusively call it the door to hell. It's roughly 70 meters wide. That's about the length of a Boeing 747, and 30 meters deep. Standing on the edge, the first thing that hits you isn't the heat, although that's intense. It's the sound. It sounds like 1,000 jet engines idling at once. It's a low-frequency roar that vibrates in your chest. Then there's the smell. It's the thick, cloying scent of methane and sulfur. If you stand downwind, it's suffocating. The air shimmers with heat distortion, making the jagged walls of the crater look like they're melting. At night, the transformation is complete. The surrounding desert becomes pitch black, and the crater becomes the only source of light for miles, casting a hellish, flickering orange glow on everything. It is, without exaggeration, one of the most terrifyingly beautiful things you will ever see. You're standing on the edge of a man-made disaster that has become a permanent landmark, a literal wound in the earth that refuses to heal. But how did this happen? How do you accidentally set the desert on fire for half a century? The story takes us back to 1971, when Turkmenistan was still part of the Soviet Union. Soviet engineers were scouring the Karakum for oil and gas. The region is incredibly rich in natural resources. They identified what they thought was a massive oil field and set up a drilling rig to start extracting, but they had miscalculated. Instead of a solid pocket of oil, they had drilled directly into a massive cavern filled with natural gas. The ground couldn't support the weight of the heavy Soviet equipment. In a terrifying moment of collapsing earth and screaming metal, the entire drilling rig and the camp were swallowed up into a massive sinkhole. Remarkably, no one was killed in the collapse, but the engineers were left with a catastrophic problem. The new crater was leaking massive amounts of methane. Methane is a dangerous gas, not just because it's highly flammable, but because it displaces oxygen. If that gas drifted toward the nearby village of Darvaza, it could have suffocated the people and livestock living there.
The Soviet scientists made a decision that seemed logical at the time. They decided to flare the gas. In the oil and gas industry, flaring is a common practice where you burn off excess gas that you can't capture. They figured that if they threw a grenade or a flare into the pit, the gas would burn off in a few weeks, the pressure would drop, and the fire would go out. They lit the match in 1971. They're still waiting for it to go out. That's over 5 decades of continuous burning. To put that in perspective, this fire has been burning since before the internet was invented, since before the first Star Wars movie hit theaters, and through the entire rise and fall of several world leaders. The sheer volume of gas being wasted is staggering. Estimates suggest that billions of cubic feet of natural gas have been lost to the atmosphere. But the real story? The real story is that we still don't actually know how deep the gas goes, or why the pressure hasn't dropped. But there's a detail most people miss when they look at photos of the crater. If you walk around the rim at night, you'll notice something moving in the shadows. Thousands of spiders are drawn to the light and heat of the crater. They swarm toward the edge, seemingly mesmerized by the flames, and then they simply crawl over the side, falling to their deaths in the fire. Nobody knows exactly why they do it, whether it's the light or some strange chemical pull, but the sight of thousands of arachnids marching into the door to hell adds a layer of surreal horror that no movie could replicate. And for a long time, the spiders were the only things that went inside. That changed in 2013 when a Canadian explorer named George Karunis became the first person to ever descend to the bottom of the crater. To do it, he had to wear a custom-made aluminized suit and use a heavy-duty Kevlar harness. He described it as being on another planet. Even with the protective gear, he could only stay down there for about 15 minutes because the heat was so punishing. But what he found down there was actually a scientific breakthrough. Despite the fire, the heat, and the methane-rich atmosphere, he collected soil samples that contained extremophile bacteria. These are organisms that thrive in environments that should be totally lethal to life. This discovery suggests that life could exist in similar conditions on other planets, turning this man-made disaster into a laboratory for astrobiology. Now, you might be wondering, can you actually visit this place? The answer is yes, but it's one of the most difficult trips you'll ever take. Turkmenistan is one of the most closed-off countries in the world, often compared to North Korea in terms of its visa process and government control. You generally need a letter of invitation and a mandatory government-approved guide to even enter the country. Once you're in, the journey to the crater is a grueling 5-hour drive from Ashgabat. Most travelers choose to camp overnight in yurts or tents near the rim. There are no fences, no railings, and no safety warnings. You can walk right up to the edge of the crumbling cliffs. It's exhilarating, but it's also genuinely dangerous. One wrong step or a sudden gust of wind and you're part of the statistics. There's no gift shop, no ticket booth, just you, the desert, and the roar of the fire. But the door to hell might not be open forever. In recent years, the Turkmen government has grown increasingly concerned about the crater. It's a bit of an embarrassment for a country that prides itself on its modern, polished image. More importantly, they see it as a waste of a valuable resource. In 2022, the president of Turkmenistan ordered experts to find a way to extinguish the fire and seal the crater once and for all. He cited environmental damage and the loss of potential revenue from the gas.
However, closing the door to hell is easier said than done. Scientists have proposed several methods, from pouring concrete over the vents to even using a controlled explosion to collapse the caverns and starve the fire of oxygen. But because the geology of the area is so porous and the gas field is so vast, there's no guarantee that any of these methods would work. There's a very real fear that if they try to seal it, the gas will simply find another way to the surface, potentially creating several smaller fires or even a more dangerous invisible leak. So for now, the fire keeps burning. It's a strange paradox of a destination. On one hand, it's a monument to human error and environmental negligence. On the other, it's a testament to the raw, untamable power of the Earth's interior. It's a place that feels like it belongs in ancient mythology, a literal gateway to the underworld. Yet it was created by a group of Soviet engineers with slide rules and drilling rigs. There is something deeply humbling about standing on that rim. We like to think we have the world figured out, that we've mapped every inch and mastered every resource. But then you see a hole in the ground that we accidentally opened and can't figure out how to close, and you realize how small our control really is. The door to hell is a flickering reminder that sometimes, when we go looking for what's hidden beneath our feet, we find things we aren't quite ready to handle. In a world where every corner seems mapped and photographed, places like this remind you that the planet still has secrets, and some of them are hiding in plain sight, burning brightly in the middle of a desert, waiting for the day we finally figure out how to look away. For now, the Karakum Desert continues to glow, the spiders continue their march, and the fire shows no sign of stopping. It's a mistake frozen in time, or rather, a mistake that's burning through it.